Man, let's jump into this episode. Before we go any further, I want to dedicate this episode to a friend of mine who we recently lost, Mark Lane. If you follow the Texans, if you follow the Cowboys, if you were on Twitter, Mark was a dude who was relentless in his process. Mark was like caviar. He was a unique taste. Mark wasn't for everybody. And what I loved about Mark was it didn't matter the hour of the day. Mark was probably doing something, Texans or Cowboy related. Nobody can transcribe an interview, a Jerry cut, a Steven cut, whatever. I remember Mark one time, Mark was in the hospital, and he texted me like 12 o'clock at night. Don't know why I was up, but I was up. Normally I'm not up. And he's like, hey, can you do a podcast tomorrow? I'm in the hospital and I can't do it. I said, well, Mark, I have my pre and post game show that I can't. I'm like, dude, the hell with that podcast. Get healthy. But that's where his mind was at. He was relentless in his approach for greatness. Many of you saw him at the combine where he was dragging around his oxygen and wearing the oxygen in his nose during the combine. But that was Mark. Mark was, I was made to work. And so this episode I dedicate to you, Mark. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being genuine. Thank you for being kind. Thank you for sending note after note, after nugget, after nugget, after statistic after statistic, and never being like, you didn't give me credit. I gave you that and you didn't give me credit. All the time willing to work. I knew that Mark loved Jesus Christ because we talked about it. We prayed about it. While he had other things going on in his life, Mark and I would pray. He would ask me to pray for him. We would pray together. He would be on the road going to Arkansas, to Dallas, to Houston, to Ohio. I mean, he was all over the place. So heaven just received one hell of a person. And I know that he'll be transcribing and writing down all the things that Jesus says up there. And to know him is to love him. And so I want to say rest in peace to Mark Lane, brother. We're going to miss you. To his family, my thoughts and prayers are with you. I am deeply saddened by the loss. And if there's anything I can ever do for any of you, Monica, his sister, you have my contact. So, yeah, man. Rest in peace to Mark Lane, man. Appreciate you, brother. Love you, man. And continue to watch down over me from the pearly skies above. All right, man. Let's get into this thing. I know that you guys haven't heard from me in a while since Super Bowl. We've been moving and shaking, doing different things, and there's a lot happening behind the scenes, but we're working those things out so that you can hear more of me and be a part of more of what we do here at Unfiltered with Jesse Holley. But let's get right into this thing, man, and I'm going to give you my thoughts and my opinions on a host of different things. Of course, Cowboy conversation, that's always in the mix. We'll talk about NBA All-Star Game and how I feel about how the players in the league has gone to a place of no return. I think we are losing ourselves as not as sports fans, but just as sports culture. We are teetering into some deep waters that I'm just like, how did we get here? And how the hell do we get ourselves back to a level of sanity in the NBA and in college football and other places? MLB pitchers and catchers and teams have reported things are underway. I want to talk about the Anthony Rendon comments. I know a lot of you may have had a chance to see them and hear them. I want to give you my perspective and point of view from them as well. But let's start with the Cowboys. They have completed their defensive hirings. They brought in Zimmer. Mike, who has already been with the Cowboys in the mid to late '90s, was a part of a Super Bowl, coached here for a long time, has gone off and done some other great things, notably being the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. He's back in Dallas with his staff assembled. We know that Dan Quinn is off to the Washington Commanders. But here's where I'm at when it comes to Zim. And I am not against the hire. I don't know if the hire makes me excited. I'm indifferent. I'm indifferent in the hire. I don't think it was bad. I don't think it was the greatest hire that we could ever make. I'm okay with it. I'm all right with it. I'm a little bit indifferent. I know that Zim brings that old school mentality, and this is where I'll continue to have these arguments with people, because there is something that I never want to be that guy that goes, I played, you didn't play. Right? I never want to be that guy that I was there and you weren't there. So there's a host of people who have opinions, and rightfully so, have your opinion. But I do think when you're talking about the new age football player, and when you're talking about bringing a guy into the fold with a relatively young core, and you're talking about bringing in a guy who even the veteran guys that you have here are not used to this style of coaching. Now, to Zim's credit, he came out in his presser and he says, I get it. I understand. Some guys I know I can, and I'm paraphrasing here, so don't. Like, he didn't say that verbatim. I'm paraphrasing here. But basically, he was saying, I know and I understand. I've been around this game long enough to know that there are certain guys who I can dog cuss out and they'll be just fine. And there are certain guys who I know I got to put my arm around them and I can't really. But when you're talking about having a sense of urgency, because you got to have the Cowboys are in a place right now where there needs to be a level of urgency. There can't be this passive approach. Because, Mike Zimmer and Mike McCarthy, they're not entering this thing with a long road ahead of them. They're entering this thing where the cliff is right there. And if they don't figure out this thing like ASAP, they're going to get pushed off of it. And I get why Jerry Jones, one of the, and this is my belief, I don't know this as Jerry's thinking, but I do think Jerry was very strategic in wanting to hire a defensive coordinator who had head coaching experience. And the reason being, if he has to make a mid-season change, he would want to go with somebody who understands what it all entails to be a head coach. That is able to do the day-to-day things to get them throughout the season. And so I think that was a part of the intentionality in picking someone who had that prior head coach experience. And that's why I think ultimately Mike Zimmer was, and not only that, but also Mike Zimmer understands the gravitas and the enormity of the Dallas Cowboys. Being here during those glory days in the 90s, understanding and watching it from a distance through all of it, I think Mike Zimmer has probably the best vision if had to make that. And I'm not saying that he will. Who the hell knows? He and Mike McCarthy may start this year out and they may be 10-0. Who knows? I do know the Cowboys will have a difficult run next year. They have the number one ranked schedule coming into football next year. The schedule makers can potentially make or break this football team. Because if you got to play Baltimore and the Niners and some other quality opponents, early in the year, and that thing is 1-4, 1-5, it could be a hook. There could be a hook. But Mike gets his staff together, and I think it's a good staff. Of course, brought in Greg Ellis, Paul Gunther. And this is the part about, trying to bring in guys that know me, that know my style, that knows my language, that knows my mentality, that knows my attitude, that can be a voice for me in every single defensive room that we have. So Zim brings his guys in. This is critical. And I think this defensive staff has to hit the ground running because you're not going to have a lot of time to change culture. I'm not saying that culture can't be changed. I find it hard to believe that culture can be changed in 6 months. There needs to be a culture change. The Cowboys, as they are currently constructed, is a group, I think, both offensively and defensively, who, culture-wise, live a country club life. You've heard the term 53 brands. I agree with it. If you are a Cowboy fan, affiliated with the Cowboys, then you know at every single turn, the 48th, 49th, 50th guy on this roster has autograph sessions, has shows, has Twitch and TikTok and all these different things. Everybody has something that they're selling. And I think the culture of this Cowboys football team is not one that is currently, as it's constructed, built, as you saw, in the playoffs to win a Super Bowl in the future. Now, this is the job that Mike Zimmer has been presented. This is the job that Mike Zimmer has been presented, and as someone who's been around this organization as a player and now in the media since 2009, I have seen what it looks like year in and year out, culture-wise. And so Mike has been asked to come in and try to change the culture and to try to give this team an edge in the playoffs. Now, many people have already come out and they have done breakdowns after breakdowns after breakdowns about what Mike's scheme is, how he'll coach, the coaches that he brought in, and all of those things. And I think those things are fantastic. I do. But I come here to talk to you and to speak to you on a level of realness. Because we can do the X and O stuff all day long, right? And there's always a time and place for that. I trust my X and O eye more than just about anybody's. So there's time and place for that. But there's also a time and place where we just have to talk about things as they are, right? The raw, uncut, the unfiltered version of it. And while we can say what kind of coach Mike Zimmer is he old school, is he new school, will that work, will that adapt? Here's my concern. And if I'm being honest, here should be your only concern as well. Because we've been through coordinator after coordinator after coordinator, player, top player, not so top, you name it. We've been through it. Is Mike Zimmer, and I have to go by what I've seen him do as a coordinator and as a coach. outside of being a defensive back coach during the time of the 90s, when that culture was a little bit different. All right? We know who was a part of those 90 teams and what that culture meant. That ain't this, and this ain't that. But if we go back, and this is where my concern is. Is Mike Zimmer and his coaching style and his coaching scheme, and I'm going to give some grace, and I'm going to give some room for development, I'm going to give some room to see. But according to his, I guess, playoff statistical run, he took over as head coach of the Minnesota Vikings in 2014. And when you look at what Zimmer was able to do in those times, as a head coach, it looks very similar to what the Cowboys have already had. He lost in the wild card in 2015. No playoffs at all in 2016. He lost in the conference championship. At least he got to the conference championship in 2017 to the Philadelphia Eagles. So one playoff win and out. He did a wild card win in 2019. Lost in the divisional round. Lost in the wild card in 2022. And then he was out. So I'm not saying that Mike Zimmer is not a good coach. I just want to have a sense of, or a feel that he will be able to get the Cowboys over this hump. Now, it ain't all on Mike. It ain't all on Mike. But because you're the new guy in town, we're expecting, the expectancy is that we can get something greater out of what we have. Now, Mike's going to go and he's going to get more linebackers, and I think that's a must. And maybe some more defensive linemen, I think that's a must. But now you have to gather all of these things because you're going to bring in guys that fit your system. You're going to eliminate some guys from the current roster that were here under Dan Quinn that may not fit what you do. There may not be a use for them anymore. And now you're going to take your new with that old, and you're going to have to marry this thing and have this this gelling of players and trying to get them to follow a common theme on what you want going forward. And for your sake, and for Mike McCarthy's sake, I really do hope that it works. I'm not here being pessimistic, but I am here saying, who is that? Sunshine Anderson? She sang a song, heard it all before, all before. We've heard this before. We've heard this with Rod Marinelli. We've heard this with Mike Nolan. We've heard this with Dan Quinn. And the results have been the same. So I'm hoping, by the hair on my chinny chin chin, that Zim and his and company and his staff that he brought together, that they will be able to take this talented, because you think about it, you think about Deron Bland, of course, Micah Parsons, Tank Lawrence, you get Trayvon Diggs back next year, Overshown comes back next year, you got Malik Hooker. I mean, you got pieces. You got guys in the interior, some rotational guys. You're going to draft guys and bring guys in free agency. Jerry Jones said he's going all in. So I'm assuming all in means that you're going to, yes, sign your guys, but you're going to go out there and you're going to be in the A+ side of free agency. Not the bottom of the barrel free agency. We'll see. We'll see. I was looking at a CBS article, and the CBS was doing like coaching staffs for each. He had different coach staff, and they had for 2024 to be a defining season. What happens in this upcoming season will directly lead to how we view these staffs. Arizona's in that mix. Buffalo's in that mix. The Broncos are in that mix. The Giants are in that mix. The Jets are in that mix. Tampa Bay's in that mix. Oh, and so is the Dallas Cowboys. And they just put the Cowboys are kind of exactly who we thought they were. They were dominant in the regular season and embarrassed themselves in the playoffs. McCarthy is 42-25 as a head coach in Dallas, but 1-3 in the postseason. He kept his job this offseason, but he has just one more year remaining on his contract. To make matters worse, Dallas lost their defensive coordinator Dan Quinn to the rival Commanders and replaced him with 67-year-old Mike Zimmer. Will the Cowboys get over the hump in 2024? What does McCarthy and company have to do to get back in 2025? No one knows. You got to, at this point in time, you gotta play in the Super Bowl. I don't think anything less than playing in the Super Bowl in New Orleans in 2025 will get Mike McCarthy and that staff back. And let's be honest, if Mike gets fired, they're not promoting. Like, if Mike gets fired we're not going to get fired at the end of the year. His contract expires. If it gets to the end of the year and his contract expires, they're not bringing in Zimmer. They're not bringing the 67. I don't know who they're going to bring in. It won't be Zimmer. So for all of their sakes, the two Mikes, Mike and Mike, Eminem, they need to have a hell of a year. They need to make this thing work and make this thing work fast.